Hello, today we're going to be talking to Dr. Penn about his experience in management. Thank you, Dr. Penn, to taking the time to meet with us today. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background experience?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Dave Penn, and I'm happy to be here. It's exciting to always talk to students about my experience and what they can take from that to benefit from your own experience as well, and then take it to another level. So I had the pleasure of being a human resources manager right after I graduated with my bachelor degree in business for Marriott Corporation. I was in a management training program that elevated me to be a human resources manager around 21 years of age. In the hotel business, it's very common to have people transfer and get promoted at other hotels within the company. So that catapulted me to be an HR director at a young age, around 23, and supervise and manage in partnership with other hotel department heads about 350 employees at a flagship hotel in New England. So I worked for Marriott Corporation for 6 years in human resources, and then I changed my career to a different industry in the nonprofit world for museums, where I was still a human resources director and eventually a vice president of the museum, overseeing a variety of the business departments. So I'll talk about my business experience predominantly in the human resources and nonprofit management world. For Marriott Corporation, I was in my position for about 6 years. I was first a human resources manager and director for about 4 years. Typically a day in the job was being a human resources generalist, where I was responsible for recruiting, training, helping employees with challenging situations in their own departments, perhaps with their supervisor. We called that employee relations. I was responsible for administering the benefit programs that included health insurance and other benefits that impacted their families. So every day was not the same. It was provided a lot of variety. So if you really like a job that relates to people a lot and a diverse and atmosphere that provides you a lot of variety, that's a good career to look at as far as being a generalist in the human resources field. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. I then changed my latter 2 years to be a night operations manager. It also afforded me the opportunity to be responsible for a large department in an operational way, where I supervising other departments of the hotel. I also had a responsibility for accounting. I had to audit and balance $14 million per year and troubleshoot lots of problems on a daily basis. So that gave me direct operational experience that allowed me to become an executive some years later in the museum business. In the museum business, I ended up working for 15 years. I was the vice president for the Orlando Science Center for 8 years, responsible for human resources, volunteer operations, youth education programs, fundraising, among other departments. And it was really an incredible experience. I was only about 26 years old, and suddenly we were raising money to build a $50 million museum, which we opened a few years later. And then I became a museum CEO for children's and science museums in Tampa and St. Petersburg, where I was a CEO for about 7 years. So I loved those responsibilities as well. In that world in business, it's important to know that nonprofits are businesses, that they're in the business of making money and meeting their mission, meaning making sure that they achieve the mission statement of the nonprofit, at the same time earning money. In the museum business, while it sounds like it's artistic, in the children's and science museum world, it was very broad-based. I was responsible for diverse programs, making sure that people who didn't traditionally visit museums would come and visit museums. What did that really mean? It meant that I was in charge of ensuring that the Latino community, the African American community, the Asian community, the LGBTQ community, senior citizens, people with disabilities were all invited to participate in interactive museums. So that was a fun job because it involved marketing, involved operations, accounting, raising funds, working with donors. It was very, very broad-based, and I typically had to operate a multi-million-dollar museum and raise more than half of that money from donors and through grants from government agencies, corporations, etc. Yeah, in museum management, the hardest part of the job, probably sometimes it was fundraising, because it depended on the economy. So I left the museum business in 2009, predominantly right at the peak of the economy crashing. So for me, it was probably good timing that I transitioned into university teaching and leading, and so. But at the time, I had raised millions of dollars over 15 years, and then at that point in 2009, when the economy was struggling, it was typical for donors to say that their primary focus was on food, homeless agencies and providing food services to people who were struggling economically, and that made sense to me. And reflecting on all the things we teach in IB, at least in the foundations course, all of the skills do. We first learn about working collaboratively with others. When I worked with 350 employees at one Marriott hotel, everybody was very different and diverse, and there's different leadership styles, different ways of behaving every day, and so really making sure that I learned how to work with different people. Writing is certainly critically important. You might learn the importance of writing emails and text messages, and making sure that you're writing grammatically correct, accurately, that you're inspiring people. I think listening skills is probably the most important, because when you're working with diverse people, you really have to look at their body language and study the cues of how they're communicating and the emotions that they're partaking in order to really help work with them and to be able to collaborate with them. So sometimes we have to have difficult conversations and manage conflict. Being kind is probably the best way to do that, and don't let others change who you truly are. Negotiating things is really important, picking your battles. And sometimes people, when you get really passionate about certain things, you have to decide, is this worth fighting for the situation? And you have to decide, which situations do I really want to advocate for more than others, so that I can still have a win-win outcome with my colleagues or a situation. And being a leader to the best of your ability, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, your goals, your passions is really, really important. And collaborating with others who accommodate your weaknesses is really important too. So I was very honest about the areas that I wasn't strong in, but I also surrounded myself with people who were much stronger at the areas where I was weak, and vice versa. And I think last, in IB, we learn about influencing and motivating people. And the most important thing I've learned about that is the best way to influence or motivate other people is to really find out what inspires them and what influences and motivates them, as opposed to providing motivation in a way that motivates us as leaders or managers. Network, and if at first you don't succeed, try again. So even in the pandemic era of things, it's important to really embark on your network in a human, communicative, social way. What do I mean by that? Don't just use social media. Don't just use LinkedIn and Handshake and these other tools to reach out. Use the real voice communication, the old-fashioned technique of picking up the phone or scheduling time with people. Yes, you can use social media to connect to 100 people. I would challenge you to actually do just that, though. Make sure that you're reaching out to 100 people if you're really challenged, and do some good old-fashioned things. It might sound corny, but sending a note card in the mail, or a $1 card a greeting card you can buy at the dollar store, and sending a card in the mail to somebody, because most people get junk mail today. But when you get a greeting card, they'll put it on their desk. When we go back to the regular world of people seeing each other in offices, if you have a greeting card on a desk from a student who's thanked you for time that you spent with them, there's probably going to be 20 people that come by the office and say, oh, well, who's the card from? And then they'll be promoting you, and suddenly you're the center of attention and the person that they want to connect with and maybe offer a job to. So that's what I would do to network and expand your horizons and get the job that you're really passionate about and want to work for.
Perfect. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And
you're welcome.